This is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom show, the wake-up call on WCOM LP, Chapel Hill and Carver, 103.5 on your FM dial, or live streaming at wcomfm.org. You can also watch the show on the People's Channel after a week's delay on Thursday night at 10 p.m., Friday morning at 6 a.m., or Tuesday at noon. The show will also be available on our YouTube channel, Wilf Wake Up Call. I'm Iris Schwinzer here with our host, Lori Hoyt, and Emily O'Hare on the camera. Today our special guest is Kristen Powers.
Thank you, Iris. We're here on a hot Wednesday afternoon, and there's something wrong with our air conditioning. So if we sound soggy, or if I sound soggy, you'll know why. I feel soggy. But we're delighted. That'll cool us off and make us happy with our guest, Kristen Powers from Alamance County.
Yes.
And we don't have a lot of people from Alamance on the show. Durham and Orange and sometimes Raleigh, but Alamance we had a few, but not too many. So I'm really particularly glad that you could come. And you're with a group called
Down Home, North Carolina.
Down Home, North Carolina. That's a relatively new group, isn't it?
Yes, we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary last week.
Oh, wow. So you've been around a little longer than I thought. My daughter lives in Graham, so I'd heard a little bit about you all. So tell us about Down Home, but before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in being an organizer?
I got involved with being an organizer after Mike Brown was killed in 2014. As a white woman, I was trying to figure out what I could do in terms of racial equity. I was out of state for college, but from North Carolina, and so trying to figure out if I should come back to the South, what I would do. So I started just taking classes and talking to people and getting involved in my community. Came back to North Carolina and got involved with Down Home right about the time they started, because it was really cool to see this multiracial group of people from all walks of life, of different abilities, different religious backgrounds, come together to work in and with and for low income and working class people throughout rural North Carolina.
Okay, so you said come back home, so you were born in North Carolina or grew up here?
I grew up in North Carolina, so I'm actually from Orange County originally.
Oh, from Orange
Yeah, I grew
County.
up on a farm in Orange County, but grew up kayaking on the Haw River in Saxe-Baja, which is where I live now.
Oh, beautiful place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So at Saxophone is right between us in Carborough and Graham and,
Yes.
and Burlington. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so you came back home to do good stuff.
Yes, that was the goal. Yeah.
Okay, well, good for you. And so tell us a little bit about Down Home. How did it get started?
Yeah, so Down Home was co-founded by Bridget Flaherty and Todd Zimmer, both North Carolinians who, with the rise of Trump and different conservative movements, they wanted an opportunity and saw an opportunity to empower people who traditionally have been left out of the electoral process or left out of decision-making halls of government and things like that.
And what were their names again?
Bridget Flaherty and Todd Zimmer.
Todd Zimmer. Okay, I think my daughter had met Todd. Okay.
Yeah,
Todd
so
and Bridget.
they did an analysis of North Carolina, looking at low-income communities, looking at communities that had a potential to flip in terms of legislative or local races, and as well as identifying areas with white supremacy activity, such as Alamance County's group called Alamance County Taking Back Alamance County, and some of the neo-Confederate rallies that had occurred in the area as well.
Yeah, that's what when I think of Alamance, I think of our recent struggle with the Silent Sam statue and some of these white supremacists. What was the white supremacist group name again?
It's called Alamance County Taking Back Alamance County,
Taking
or
Back Alamance.
locally known as Act Back.
Oh, that's the one that, yeah, Act Back. Yeah, that's what I'd heard them referred as. So that seemed pretty scary to me. That they're a pretty aggressive group, and so you all decided to do some groundwork and try to make a change in a pretty tough place to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you go about, how are you all doing that? How are you organizing?
Right, so Down Home started by doing a community canvas in some ways. So they went to different neighborhoods to ask what issues were impacting them. And it's a member-led organization, so all the members who are low-income, working class, or their allies came together and identified issues. So for example, I help lead the bail fund that we are starting at Down Home, North Carolina. And that was started because the criminalization of the poor working group identified bail as a major issue that directly impacts people who are poor.
Oh, that's a great, yeah, they're doing that here too.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. I think that's that awareness is all over the country now, how many people are in jail, not because they've been proven to have done anything criminal, but because they can't afford bail to get out of jail to prove their innocence or to pay their fine.
Right.
Yeah, so when did you all start that?
Well, so we actually launched our bail fund within the last month. So
it was
it's pretty
new too.
Yes, so we're learning about the process, learning from people like Muffin Hudson out in Durham, who has run successfully the first bail fund in North Carolina for all different types of people who are impacted. There's been historically some other bail funds that have addressed, for example, political activists who get arrested during different actions, but this is I think within maybe the first 5 bail funds in North Carolina that are sustaining bail funds. So we'll hopefully be here for, hopefully not for too long, because honestly we'd like to end bail at some point, you know, as a state, as a county, as activists. So we kind of want to work ourselves out of a job with the bail fund.
Yeah, well, that's what I understand they're trying here, to get enough of a fund where they could front the bail for people, and then as the bail comes back, it can sustain the fund and keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what, do I understand?
Yeah, so ours is a revolving bail fund, similar
Yeah.
concept, yeah, where you help bail people out based on potentially on criteria that you might set as a bail fund. And then as they show up to court and finish their different court proceedings, you get the money back, and so you can recycle it for other people who may need help.
And what's so nice about having a nonprofit doing that, if it was through a bail bonds person, then even if they're innocent, I think they forfeit 10% or a certain amount, because that person feels that they've got to make their income.
Mm-hmm.
It's a profit-making thing, not a public service so much.
Right, yeah, so 10% is usually the cut that bail bondsmen will take, and often it's usually the only option for people to get out because of the prices of the bail. Unfortunately, because it is a profit-making industry, some amounts that you or I or someone with economic privilege might think is not that hard to come up with, the bail bondsman won't necessarily support. So in Alamance County, talking to a bondsman, he noted that bail under 1,000 is less likely to be addressed by a bondsman because it's not worth the time and energy to go into it. So people are stuck in jail because they cannot afford to pay their bail, and they don't have the bondsman available to bail them out.
So even if you have a bail of $300 or $400, which to somebody else may not seem like that big a deal, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that could be and then usually when you're in that economic situation, most people you know are in that same economic situation. So it's not like your friend can lend you $300, $400, $500, $600. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so thrilled that you're doing that. I was so thrilled when we started doing that just some months ago here in Orange County. It's being spearheaded at Binkley Church.
Right.
So you're probably in touch with them too, or could be, I guess.
Yeah, we're familiar with their work, so it's exciting.
Yeah. So that's great. So what else is you did a survey. What did the survey show in terms of what are people's concerns?
Yeah, so a big one is Medicaid expansion. That is a major priority. In Alamance County, there's a lot of people who fall into that gap between the Medicaid coverage and private insurance or work-based insurance. So that's been a major effort of some of our members who obviously feel very passionate about that issue. And then Down Home also does some electoral work as well. So, knowing that people who are elected can influence people's lives, especially those who may not have economic means, they often will try to put together a platform committee, meet with elected officials, and try to better understand which candidates will best represent their needs.
And so if you try to have like an electoral platform where have whoever's up for election come out and speak to people, are your representatives very responsive?
We've had some representatives who are responsive. So Alamance County is traditionally conservative, so
I know it is, yeah.
Not all of them are going to be interested in Down Home's endorsement.
Yeah. So even without an endorsement, though, I wonder what their response is if they're invited to come out to, with other people who are running to have tell what their platform is and what they're standing for and against. So they are they pretty responsive?
They can be. So for example, Down Home members attended the Second Chance Lobby Day in Raleigh in May, which was an effort to advocate for reentry legislation. So people who are reentering from prison or who have criminal records have a incredibly difficult time obtaining things like jobs or housing. So some of our members went out to advocate for that, and we actually were able to meet somewhat unexpectedly out on the sidewalk one of our representatives who did mention that he was going to support the Second Chance Act at the General Assembly and was voting on it, I believe, later that day. And he did end up, the Senate unanimously passed the Second Chance Act. So he did stick to what he was going to say, and it was one example of where we could get some bipartisan work done. But in terms of, for example, the Medicaid expansion is a little bit of a different response from the elected officials.
Yeah. So on that though, you did get at least some response. Is the Democratic Party strong? I imagine not in Alamance. Is there a two-party system in Alamance?
There's a two-party system, and it is pretty strong. And I think that the current leadership is doing a great job, and is really exciting that it's a woman who's in charge right now, and she's doing great. So
that's encouraging.
Yeah. So I think it has solid infrastructure, and I know the Democrats work hard, and they tend to be the people we are able to meet more so with on the platform committee, but we extend invitations to anyone who's willing to listen. And even for things like the bail reform, Superior Court judges and district attorneys and different elected officials within the court system influence bail. So if we wanted to learn more about what they're doing to change their bail policy, we can try to set up a meeting as members, and then the members who have been directly impacted by bail or have family members who have been impacted can share their real life stories. And that's usually more impactful than a bunch of numbers.
So it sounds like even though you've only been going for 2 years, that you're really, getting to have some impact and getting people to know that you're there.
Yes.
Not just the residents, but then also some of the elected officials, and because they probably, especially if a counterpart is going to be telling what's their platform, they probably want a chance to compete and say what theirs is. Is there any other group besides Down Home? Well, there is the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Is there any other progressive group?
Yeah, the Alamance actually has quite a bit of progressive groups. We're small and not super well funded or staffed like perhaps other Triangle organizations are, but we of course have our Alamance NAACP chapter. NAACP. We have Benevolence Farm, which helps women reenter from prisons. We have the Saxe-Baja Social Justice Exchange, and a variety of other nonprofits that support work throughout the county.
So I guess do you all collaborate together?
Yeah, there's a lot of collaboration. You kind of have to, and
Yeah, I was gonna say
it's such
when
a
you're all small.
community.
Yeah, not to get invested in particular turf, but to try to really pull together. So the other one you mentioned was the Benevolence Farm that you mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah, Emily and I and another friend visited there a few months ago. I'm still trying to I've left messages, and somebody told me that you're on their board.
I'm the board chair, yes.
Well, I've been trying to get up with LaShawna.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I've left messages with this phone number that's on the card, and I'm not sure how the communication works, so if
Okay, I can probably hook you up
if you
later.
can put it on, she probably is real busy, I'm sure this is planting time.
Yeah, summer is.
On a farm, and, but if you could put in the word and tell her that I'm trying to follow through on my word to her that I'd like to get her on the show and give her a chance to tell them. We were so impressed with the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the work that Benevolence does.
Yeah, I mean, and it's such a comprehensive program in terms of rehabilitation. From a place to live, but also in getting them prepared to be out on their own. Where they'll have rent receipts to show they paid their rent, where those who don't have a license where they can get their, because these days a car can be so essential, particularly if you're in a rural area.
Right.
Just all the nuts and bolts that can get you back into society where you have a fighting chance to be able to make it. And and to give that kind of support and the farm they were working so hard the day we were there. It was
Right.
looking beautiful.
Yes, yeah, they are very hardworking women.
Yeah, and that barn was so impressive that NC State had put up for them. It was just beautiful. Yeah, I want to go back out there and bring some other people, but I do want to tell LaShawna and bring whomever she can or would like to bring. It doesn't have to be one person. So on back to Down Home. So with Down Home, about how many are on your staff?
So there's only in Alamance County one community organizer who's on staff right now, and I'm on contract as the bail coordinator. So I will be working there to help get the bail fund set up.
So you're the only regular staff member then?
So we have a community organizer who's regular staff in Alamance.
Oh, I
then-
see. So
and then I
there's one regular
specifically
staff
do
and then
bail.
you're in contract to do the bail bond.
Yeah, and then Todd and Bridget are the co-founders, and Todd is more involved with the Alamance chapter, and Bridget tends to do our Western chapters out in the
She
mountains.
tends to be the what?
Do the supervised Western chapters. So we have chapters out in Madison,
Okay.
Haywood, and then we're trying to start Haywood to Jackson County, and then trying to start a few more out in that area.
So wait a minute. So I thought Down Home was just Alamance. Well, tell us about that. So
So again, with kind of what I was describing earlier, when Bridget and Todd started this, they did an analysis on different economic factors, activity politically, and in terms again of the kind of the Trump movement backlash with white supremacy movements. So they had identified Jackson and Haywood County originally alongside Alamance. So they did one Piedmont, one Western Mountains region, and they're
where's
expanding.
Jackson County?
It is.
Is that in the west?
It's in the west, in the mountains. Yeah, so it's
Oh.
near the border.
Yeah, I've heard of Haywood, but Jackson just. So
Yeah,
how
they
many
border one
counties are
one
you
another.
in right? How many counties are you in right now?
Who I know we're definitely in 3, but we're building out. I think to at least 2 more this year.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you get funding?
So funding, you can always become a member.
Okay.
So if you are, even if you're just an ally living in Chapel Hill, Carborough, you don't have to live in Alamance County, but we rely on sustaining members to support the work, and then just like any other nonprofit, to grants, foundation support, things like that are also critical for our work.
So do you have does Bridget or Todd or somebody who is really good at grant writing?
Yeah, they're both very good. They're very experienced at this and have done a great job sharing what we're doing with different communities.
That's wonderful. Yeah, because it takes some money to get things going. Yeah, yeah. So I didn't realize it was that big down home. I mean,
Oh, yes, yeah.
I just had heard about it in Alamance and didn't realize. So it's in 3 counties now, and maybe we'll have a few more coming up. Yeah, but sort of going towards the west. Yeah, because we're probably having so many east of Burlington. It's, between Durham and Orange, there's a lot of organizing going on in some of these more populous
Correct.
counties. So yeah, and what about in Greensboro?
So we don't have any activity in Greensboro.
But
Todd is from Greensboro, and that's currently where he lives. But other than that, we don't have any organizational capacity or work done in Greensboro.
Yeah, Greensboro probably has a fair amount of organization going on there. Are you sort of specializing in rural areas?
Yeah, so that's the focus of Down Home, is to organize in rural and small town North Carolina.
Okay. So Graham, well, that's where I think Todd or someone was doing a survey then, and yeah, she's in a little working class neighborhood there.
Yeah.
On Poplar. So I think that's really smart because there's such a need.
Yeah, it is.
For these areas that have been sort of forgotten by a lot of other organizing groups.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are, a lot of times the media, there's not even that much media.
Right, yeah. Even in Alamance, we have the Times News, which is based in Burlington. And then other than that, it's just the Alamance News, which is a conservative newspaper. But we don't have any, no station, well, we have like one small radio station, but no TV networks. They usually come from Greensboro or the Triad. So we're somewhat limited in our news outreach within Alamance.
So do you get some TV outlet? I didn't quite understand. Do you get some from from Greensboro?
Yeah, so usually if we get any media coverage, it's from Greensboro or Chapel Hill or Durham stations. We don't have any that are, as far as I know, besides Elon News Network, that are based in Alamance.
Yeah. So the news comes from these other places, and then what about like your Is Mark Walker one of your?
Yeah, he is all of Alamance's congressional representative.
He's in Washington.
Yes, in the 6th district.
Yeah, yeah. And he's very conservative.
Yes. Well, and we have trouble meeting with him too. That's another challenge we face is inaccessibility.
That's a huge problem with conservatives. I mean, with Tom Tillis, people have been going for months on Tuesdays, and he refuses to meet with them.
Right.
So it's very difficult because that's supposed to be what they're supposed to listen to their constituents. Yeah. So are you feeling that you're going to stay with Down Home, or you're on a contract you really can't say for sure?
Well, so I will always be a member of Down Home. So
You
even after I support the bail fund, in terms of my work, I will continue to be a member, and was a member before I started supporting the bail fund, and that looks like different capacities, like supporting working groups or attending events, or I was doing a lot as a member before. I was officially contracted to do the bail fund, and the reason I was able to do the bail fund is I had previous experience with that at my day job, so I had some background information to contribute.
What was your day job?
I'm the advocacy coordinator at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice.
And where is that located?
That's based in Durham, but we work all across the South.
Okay, so you're getting a great education with that.
Yes. Yeah, we're currently nervously waiting our results of our partisan gerrymandering case, which comes out tomorrow.
And what gets, I didn't quite understand what comes up.
The partisan gerrymandering case at the Supreme Court comes out tomorrow.
Oh, that is tomorrow.
Yes.
Oh.
Along with the census question. I
Yes.
believe. Mhm.
Those two things are, so one of them's coming up tomorrow.
I think both of them are, because they have to finish out they release their opinions at different times within a certain few number of weeks, and then tomorrow is officially the last day. So I think it was 8 cases total that haven't been released, so we know that it has to come out tomorrow.
Oh, well, that'll be exciting, and tonight is the first of the Democratic Party debates. Well, it won't really be a debate, it's, well, what can we call it, a program?
Yeah.
I guess getting to know you, or.
Getting to know you, right? Yeah.
They can't really debate each other, but they can try to present what they stand for.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, so that's tonight and tomorrow night, so that's kind of deflected my attention, plus some other family issues. So tomorrow, so we gotta pay attention to
I
that.
think tomorrow and Friday will be very busy days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna take a station break.
Okay.
And catch our breath, and then come back and be thinking of if I haven't asked you some points that you wanna make sure that you get out there and we tell people about.
This is Will's Wake Up Call on WCOM-LP, Chapel Hill and Carver, 103.5 FM. You can stream us live at WCOMFM.org.
And there's not a lot of announcements, but I do have one, and that is the 4th of July is coming up, and Carborough always has this wonderful July 4th celebration. It's a real small town celebration, it's a real festival, and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which is our group that is sponsoring this show, we'll have a table there, and we'll have information about work that we're doing. We have a very strong anti-racist committee, and we have a very strong environmental committee, so we'll be, and we have a strong labor committee, so we're a multi-issue group, and so we'll be we're always next to the Carborough Branch Library under the trees, and so we'll have lots of information, and we look forward, we're there every year. And also, I'm sure a lot of people will be going to the Eno Festival, and the Eno Festival, I'm old enough, I was there when it started, I lived in Durham, can't even remember how many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, and Margaret Nygaard, who has since passed, was this wonderful woman who loved the Eno River, and she started the Eno organization to protect the banks of the Eno so that they wouldn't have development come right up, which of course ruins rivers. And so it's taken off, and now that festival is huge. It started down, of course, small. So there's lots of interesting things coming up over the holidays. And I think they read, Douglass, his proclamation about...
Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass about what does the 4th of July mean to black people. I think they have that at the Century Center each 4th of July. So there's all kinds of activities going on, a lot of which are just sheer fun and being part of a community and giving kids a lot of enjoyment, but some of them are much more serious and worth paying a lot of attention to. And in light of talking about things that are serious and worth paying attention to, we're talking to Kristen Powers from down home, North Carolina, and she's based in Alamance County. And we're talking about it's a 2-year-old organization that is now in 3 counties working with rural people who a lot of times get left out in terms of a lot of information that can help you make better decisions when you're in that voting booth, and to know more about what people really stand for and what their sometimes people talk a good talk, but they don't walk the walk. Their actions don't mount or measure up to what their talk is. So the more information we can get about what our politicians and our representatives are actually doing and voting for. And this is a great organization that is working with rural people in 3 counties right now, and hoping to move on to a couple more counties, but going west of Alamance to the western states, which can be kind of the forgotten states. We're so used to the Piedmont and the Triad and the more populous cities having all kinds of organization going on, but there's not a lot in the rural areas. So I'm delighted to have Kristen Powers here, and she's working with Down Home, and she's working on bail bond issues, which is relatively new. I started hearing about this issue a couple of years ago. We had somebody from the NAACP on this show. We've had 2 people on. We've had James Williams on about that and Ty Hunter. And both of them started getting the word out to our listeners and to us and our organizations about how things had changed so much, that these fines and these bonds used to be much smaller, and that they've grown exponentially. So that it's not what we think of, that maybe it's $75 or something. It's like everything else. Inflation has affected it more than inflation, just somebody wanted to make a lot of money on poor people. And so fortunately that's coming out into the light, and people are starting to work on it. And Kristen Powers is working on it in Alamance County.
Yes.
So how is that going?
It's going well. We just launched a webpage actually for people to go visit, and so it's downhomenc.org/bailfund. So again, that's downhomenc.org/bailfund. So you can learn a little bit more about it. You can donate and support the work, because as we talked about earlier, it's a revolving fund. So any money that you donate to support the bail fund is recycled. It's a investment essentially in your community, because you have, for bail funds usually, so you get your money back when someone appears to court, and bail funds typically have a much higher across the country have a much higher appearance rate at courts than if someone bailed themselves out, because we are providing that support and the gentle reminders to come to court and things like that. So bail funds are really disproving the need for a money bail, because a lot of people will argue, well, you need to have something on the hook to come back to court, and a lot of people are actually just showing up with text reminders when they get bailed out and don't have to pay. But again, this disproportionately impacts people who are poor. If you committed, a crime and it was really bad, and you got $100,000 bail, you could still get out if you're rich. If you're rich and guilty, you could get out. If you were poor and innocent, you couldn't. So people who have the means to get out can. So people, whatever your arguments are for bail, it's fairly unjust, because it's basically, again, a criminalization of the poor, because if you have the money, no matter what crime you committed, you could get out.
Yeah, and that was shocking to find out that, I think maybe the percentage of people who are in jail for that reason, not that they've committed any proven crime yet, or even a lot of times it's just because they can't pay their fine.
Right, and in Alamance County, the most recent statistics I've seen is that approximately 84% of people in our jail have not yet been convicted of the crime for which they're incarcerated in the jail.
84%? Oh, that's even worse than I thought it was.
Yeah, I think the national average tends to be around 75, which is still
terrible.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, and then sheriffs or police chiefs, they're a lot of times said, oh, we need more money to build a bigger jail because it's too crowded. And of course you don't like your jails crowded, and that's not good for people. But if they're crowded with people who don't need to be there,
Right.
I mean,
Yes,
and
a lot of these
is,
overcrowding problems could
that's
be
why it's so
solved.
important to get this information out, that people understand it. Because
Right.
I don't think most of us until a year or two ago had any idea of the huge percentage of people who are sitting in jail who've not done anything that's been proven, and a lot of times it's just because they're poor. And the poor are funding a lot of municipal activities.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like this tax on the poor.
Yes. You basically could teach this class. I feel like you know as much as I
mean,
do.
the more
Yeah.
you think about the repercussions, I mean, it's just so upsetting.
Right, it is, yeah.
So I hope you have people helping you, whether it's volunteers. I know you probably don't have a lot of staff. Do you have volunteers working with you?
Yeah, so again, our members, who are all volunteers, are supporting the work and doing the work, and coming up and directing what we do. I mean, again, it's member-led, so it's not an organization where the leader comes in and says, all right, y'all, we're going to do X, Y, or Z this year. It's, all right, y'all tell me what I need to be working on as your executive director or community organizer. And the Stop Criminalizing the Poor working group in Alamance County is made up of down-home members, and then the advisory council that guides the bail fund specifically is also made up of the down-home members as well.
And is the NAACP in Alamance County working with you on this particular project?
So we are always seeking partners to support our work. We haven't created a direct relationship in terms of bail, but we're always finding ways to work with one another. And it was actually an incident a few months ago where at the time the Alamance NAACP president was arrested for interrupting a public meeting, and actually had his bail set at $500 for a misdemeanor. So his case is actually one that has highlighted an issue or a reason to be against bail, because people are like, well, clearly he's going to come to court, and he has no history of skipping court, and he's not a danger to society, but yet you're setting this arbitrary amount of money. And if he didn't have the money, he would still be in jail right now because his court case is still being continued. It's not yet resolved.
Wow. So I hope that got a lot of headlines.
Locally it did, yeah. I'm not sure how much people are aware of it outside the county, but in terms of
But in the county,
NAACP has definitely been focusing on issues that are impacting Alamance County, such as bail.
yeah, because I know the NAACP here in Chapel Hill, Carrboro has been real focused on that. Of course, one of the vice presidents, James Williams, was the Orange County chief defender,
Right.
and in charge of that huge department. So that has really
Yeah.
kept them, and Ty Hunter also. So we've been extra fortunate with their knowledge and their expertise about how the court system works.
Yeah, and that's something too that Orange County or Durham or some of the more metropolitan areas are lucky to have public defenders like Mr. Williams. So Alamance County does not have a public defender system.
Oh, you don't?
No, so most rural counties do not have funding for public defender systems. So they get court-appointed attorneys, which are privately retained or contracted with the local government to provide services to address the constitutional right to an attorney, but they are not within a pre-trial public defense system. So it's not as equitable or comprehensive as, say, the public defender office in Orange County, in Mecklenburg County, and Durham County.
And probably if they're private attorneys, they probably have to charge more than a public defender would charge.
Yeah, there's some. It can get like a little complicated, but
Yeah.
but definitely, I mean, because you still have to pay $60 for a public defender in North Carolina. There's a public defense fee, but you're gonna probably get representation with more resources with a public defender office, and more immediate representation to support you in your first appearance, to advocate and to get to know you to lower your bond, because one thing you can do as well, to reduce the bond in the meantime right now, is to get a attorney or yourself to convince a judge to lower the bond.
So with this NAACP, what was it, the head or
The president.
the president? Were they willing? Was he able to get the judge to lower his?
So he was released before he saw the judge, because of a local community member posting bail. So yeah, he was released within, I think, an hour of getting arrested.
So he had because of his position, he had a friend who could come forth for him, which a lot of people wouldn't have.
Right, and usually even with first appearances, sometimes like if you get arrested on a Friday night, you're in trouble, because you won't see a judge until Monday morning.
Because it's the magistrate sets the bond, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the amount of training they have can vary a lot.
Yeah, so, and it's somewhat confusing, because clerks of court can nominate people to become magistrates. The Superior Court can select them based on those suggestions, but then a district court judge manages them and has discretion over disciplinary action or removal from their position.
Yeah, so it gets kind of confusing for the average person once they get in trouble with the law, just how the whole system works. I think we don't
it's
get
very
any
entangled.
education.
It's very confusing, even for attorneys who practice in different counties. Even, like I said, Durham, for example, has a public defender office, and even if they move to another place with a public defender office, things are done differently. It's all local flavors to the different systems.
Yeah, because a lot of times an attorney from one county won't want to come represent you in another county because they don't know for sure how that system works and which judge would be good to get in front of, or there's just a lot of local knowledge. So you have some volunteers working with you on this?
Yes.
Because I know in Orange County, even though they have more resources than Alamance, I mean, they're depending on court watchers and a whole host of volunteers to pay attention to that. I know with Binkley, they were wanting over several months to have court watchers and 2 people there all 5 days, 2 different people. So that would be 10 people a week.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of volunteers. It's a big commitment.
Right.
And for the volunteers to figure they'll be doing it for several months till they get enough data, and then they'll make a report to the court. So I hope you have you probably have not quite that many volunteers.
Not quite. We have a small cohort right now who's doing some court watching. And some people had gained experience from court watching during the Alamance 12 cases, which is when 12 people were charged with felonies for voting while on felony probation, which is...
For doing what?
For voting while on felony probation.
Oh, I remember when that was...
Yeah, so to support those individuals, a lot of people showed up at court. So some folks have had informal court watching training. And then we also, again, because of the member-led model, people are... who are our members are also sometimes directly impacted by these issues. So we've also had members who are who have experienced bail, who've had to be bailed out, who've bailed out family members. So their direct experience guides our work as well.
Oh, that's really smart. Yeah. So to be a member, what is the process? And is there what is the membership dues?
Yeah, so it's flexible. It's actually no rigid requirement, because obviously it is a membership base for people without a lot of means. So they may have recommended amounts, but if you can't afford it, you can still become a member. So for example, I think mine is like $25 or something like that a month. But you could also do $1 a month, pay $12 a year. And you can just go to downhomenc.org and fill out a membership commitment. basically just affirming that you support the values and principles of Down Home and the members, and make a financial commitment as well.
Yeah, that would be, I'm just saying to our listeners in Orange County, a lot of times, we have really good representatives usually, and so a lot of times, calling our representatives, they're all on the same page with us, and so I know some people who will have gone at election time to further out counties that need more help than is needed here. But I just thought this would be a great way to be to help with people who don't always vote progressive, and just to help with that voting in rural places like that. That would be great for many of us to become members.
Yeah, and all are welcome to our membership chapter meetings too. So usually they're at the end of the month, and upon becoming a member, you can learn more about those meetings. But we have folks from Orange County come out and support us as well.
Yeah, I can't remember what group it was, but I remember with the last time there was voting, there were vans going out to further counties to do door to door and really try to make an impact where there's not a whole lot of people tripping over each other. We're here, there's, not that there's not a need,
Right.
but it's still a lot of times people are agreeing with you anyhow, so you're just shoring up the base, where it would be really a good idea to be helpful in these places that they really are in the trenches in terms of the huge impact of conservative thinking there, and to try to make some changes and inroads into that.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm really glad to get this kind of an update. So you're working on bail bond, and then there'll be elections. Is there another component?
So Down Home has a 501c3 and a 501c4 component, so there's different tax designations. So their nonprofits can't get involved with political efforts, but a C4 can do some political or electoral activity. And there's a lot of laws and regulations for those who are interested in how that works. But I know they'll probably be involved, at the very least, supporting the issues and highlighting issues that their members care about.
Yeah, well, I think the NAACP, and I know our Women's International League, we can't go around say vote Democrat or vote Republican, but we can try to put out a list of what the issues are.
Yes.
And factual issues, and then we also can encourage people to vote. And a lot of times, the more people you get to vote, and if they get more information about the factual issues, it can help a more progressive vote.
Right.
Yeah. So you have some involvement with electoral.
Yeah, so for example, last election cycle, Down Home did a march to the polls, and so they rallied people to try to come out and vote, especially to counter the fears around that, or fears that arose as part of the Alamance 12, for people being afraid that they'd get in trouble for voting in Alamance County. So the march was actually led by one of the Alamance 12, who went and voted because they were no longer on probation. So at that point, 2 years later, they could vote. So it was an effort to not only get the vote out, but also to make a statement that Alamance County citizens and residents are not to won't be intimidated out of our rights. So Down Home does a lot of stuff like that, where it's kind of a double meaning. Not only are we doing things like getting out the vote, but we're also going to make a statement while we're doing them.
Well, tell us a little bit more, because some people may not be familiar with, and I'm a little hazy on some of the actual details of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what happened there?
Right. So in North Carolina, it is illegal to vote while you're on felony probation and post-release. Basically, if you had a felony and served time in prison, or you didn't serve time in prison but are put on felony probation, you cannot vote. And so if in different states there are different laws based on that, but that's what it is in North Carolina. And it's what's called a strict liability law. So strict liability means it doesn't matter what your intent was. You could do it by accident, and you're still liable. So, for example, I think almost all of the voters that were charged with another felony for voting said that they had no idea it was illegal. They thought it was within their rights. They didn't understand. They were out in the community paying taxes, and yet they were. It was illegal for them to vote.
So it was illegal because they were on probation?
Felony probation, yeah. If you're on misdemeanor probation, you can't vote.
So once you are off of probation and you served your sentence, you can vote.
Yeah, once everything's done, once your probation officer actually will give you a form indicating your restoration of rights, but it's unclear who's supposed to tell you at the very beginning that you can't vote at the moment. So,
Right.
but
So they're supposed to give you a form that you have restoration of rights?
at the end of your sentence, yeah. So you're made aware that you can go re-register, but there's nothing to say at the beginning, or there's not a very clear process at the beginning
Okay.
to tell you can't at this time when you're starting off on your probation terms. And Alamance County was the only county in the state where the prosecutor decided to charge so many people. I think there was one or two that charged, maybe one or two people, but this was a mass prosecution case, and the prosecutor at the time refused to drop the charges and ended up losing his election.
I was just going to say, when is he up for election?
Yeah, I think he lost it for different reasons, unfortunately, but I mean, it was a really controversial event in Alamance County.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think most, if not all, of the charges were dropped to misdemeanor obstruction of justice, but they still had unsupervised probation for a year, for 12 months, and had to do community service, so it wasn't without repercussions.
Yeah.
And the chilling effect for their community, who saw them going through this situation and thought, well, am I allowed to vote? And that's something I had seen in the community too, was people who'd not voted for decades because they thought they weren't allowed to, and didn't want to get in more trouble, so they just stayed at home. So there's a lot of confusion around that, and so much so that the New York Times even highlighted this issue around the time the court cases were being heard.
Oh, did the New York Times? Well, that...
And the Huffington Post too.
Yeah, well, good for them. And I think in some states, even when you're all finished with everything, I think some states still don't allow you to vote. And recently, Florida passed a pretty sweeping bill that gave all these people who had been accused and had paid their debt had not been able to vote, now that they can, but some of the legislators are trying to reverse that.
Yes, yeah, and there's a handful of states where you have to basically petition the governor to give you your rights back, which you can imagine is an arduous and scary process. And Florida's was particularly unsettling. I think in the time that they had their clemency boards on this issue, or boards reviewing the restoration of voting rights, something like 1%, definitely less than 10% of all the cases that were heard were denied. And that meant you had to wait so many more years until you got another chance to petition the governor. But you also had to go to Tallahassee to do that, show up in person at a certain date. And
this is one of the few countries that puts so many obstacles and tries to discourage people from voting, where a lot of other countries do everything to encourage it. And that says something about the land of the free, and that we're so democratic. I mean, it's really a crying shame.
Right. Well, and it's the only two states that never rescind your right to vote are in New England, which is some of the whitest states. So definitely where black people or people of color are being denied the right to vote far greater rates. And it's, a lot of people will say, well, why should they have the right to vote if they committed a crime? But a right is a right, and you don't lose the right to practice religion. You don't lose your right to certain.
You're still a human being.
Yeah,
and you're still a citizen.
Right. So, the argument, I can understand how it got pushed and how it got accepted, but really, when you look at if you truly believe voting is a right, it should not be taken away. And so I don't think North Carolina is anywhere near getting to that point, but we are hoping to see, hopefully in the next few years, a push to at least only disenfranchise people in prison for the time being until we can push that full enfranchisement. Because I think, realistically, we can get that far because that's where some other states are moving. And logistically, it'd be a lot less confusing.
So did you say New England, 2 states,
Yeah, one of them's Vermont. I believe the other one's Maine.
and they let everybody vote?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that it's more ability to vote, not less. Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. So that is a lot of work to be done all over the country.
Yes, it is.
We've been talking to Kristen Powers from Alamance County's Down Home, North Carolina. And it's in Alamance County and 2 other counties, and trying to expand into a few others. And they're specifically trying to organize in rural areas and help organize people to know what their rights are, and to encourage them to vote. And also they're working on the bail bond issue, which is now a hot issue in many areas, and right here in Orange County and in Durham County also. Kristen, thank you for your work and commitment, and we're so glad that you're able to come and tell us more about Down Home, North Carolina.
Thank you for having me.